First item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence. I have only two, which is Councillor Henwood and Councillor Walker. I need to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Members indicate to wish to speak by pressing the right-hand button on the microphone unit. Has anybody got any interest to declare? No, nobody's got an interest whatsoever. Right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask our Vice Chair, Sam, if she will read out the safety notice, please. Thank you very much.
The building fire alarm signal is a continuous two-tone alarm. On hearing the evacuation alarm is 1. Leave the building by the nearest marked exit route. 2. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. 3. Anyone who cannot use the stairs will be helped by officers present after the people have left. 4. Do not return to the building until told it is safe to do so by an authorised officer. The whole of the council site is a no smoking area. Mobile phones must be switched to silent. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Third on the item on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of two meetings, one which was in a proper meeting on the 2nd of February, and the other one was the post change to announce the new chairman on the 28th of April. Would anybody like to make any comments on either of those minutes? In which case, can I have on the voting buttons a vote to accept those minutes, please? And in favour, and no abstentions, and no against. So that is carried. Thank you very much. The agenda is to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business, and we have none. So moving swiftly on to the fifth item on the agenda. This is a request for an increase in Hackney carriage fares for 2022. You've seen the report in here. I'm going to ask John if he will give us his analysis of the whole thing and tell us all about it, and then we will debate it. Thank you very much indeed, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. As you see, the report in front of the committee this evening is to consider an application from a section of the taxi trade requesting an increase in the Hackney carriage fares. And the recommendations in the report are for members to consider the request to either A, agree with the submitted proposal and amend and increase the tariff by the requested amounts, B, consider an alternative increase to the existing free tariffs, C, to consider no increase to the tariff, or D, to review the request in 6 months' time. The background to the request and the report are that the fares charged by Hackney carriages, brackets taxis, are set and regulated by the council. There is a set tariff for journeys, and drivers are not permitted to charge any more than the metered fare, although they can charge less if they wish. The council does not have the ability to regulate fares within the private hire industry. Now, Station Taxis of Burgess Hill, which is a private hire company, which has a mix of licensed private hire and Hackney vehicles, approached the council to request an increase in the Hackney carriage fares. That was on behalf of the Hackney trade, and you will see at Appendix 1 the letter and email from Station Taxis in support of the request. It should be noted that Station Taxis have already adopted the proposed new tariff system for their own private hire vehicles working on their circuit. The taxis working on their circuit still charge the existing Mid-Sussex tariff. Ordinarily, the Mid-Sussex Taxi Association are the recognised channel of communication between the Hackney trade and the council, but unfortunately that hasn't been an active association since 2018 and hasn't been functioning since. Station Taxis conducted an initial petition of interested parties within the trade and then forwarded their representations for the fare increase direct to the licensing department. You'll see their full grounds on the attached letter and email on Appendix 1, but in essence it was the fact that there'd only been one rise in the previous 7 years, which was in 2018, and there has been a general increase in the cost of living, fuel and car maintenance costs over the 3 years since that previous increase. I would point out that there have been additional costs to the hackney trade due to the introduction of the statutory standards, which is the rollout of mandatory training and the planned introduction of CCTV in vehicles. And also there's been a significant loss of income due to the effects of the pandemic. Following the submission by station taxis, the licensing department wrote to all hackney carriage vehicle licence holders to canvass their views regarding the fare increase. There's a total of 134 vehicle licence holders who were contacted. Some licence holders have more than one vehicle licence. They were only allowed one vote rather than multiple votes for each licence they held. A total of 67 vehicle owners responded. Of these responses, 37, 55% were in favour, and 30, 45% were against. During the process, a number of drivers submitted additional comments with their responses, both for and against the proposal, and these have been collated, anonymised, and are attached at Appendix 2 for the benefit of the committee. Currently, there are 3 tariffs in use on the current system within Mid-Sussex. The proposal is for 2 additional tariffs to be introduced for drivers working unsocial hours at the weekend. There is also a proposal to increase the waiting time periods and waiting time charge. I've attached a report, an explanation as to how these changes are likely to affect fares during the day and evening time, which is at Appendix 5. You will find the current tariff actually at Appendix 3 and the proposed new tariff at Appendix 4. The policy context is that Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 gives the authority to the District Council to fix fares for journeys within the district, for vehicles licensed within the district, hackney vehicles that is. There are financial implications to amend the hackney carriage tariff, as there are advertising costs in the local newspapers. That cost is detailed, or the estimated cost is detailed within the report, and that will be met from the existing budget within the licensing department. That's the report before members, and obviously I'm available for any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much indeed, John. As I see it, we have 4 proposals, obviously. Agreed with the submitted proposal and amend and increase the tariff by the requested amounts. Consider an alternative increase to the existing 3 tariffs, or consider no increase to the tariff. The existing 3 tariffs would then be changed. If we decided on that particular option, they would change to 5, which seems to be very much in favour by station taxis. As I see it, a number of taxi drivers are concerned that they are losing out at the moment in terms of money. But on the other hand, there is an equal number, or fairly equal number, of taxi drivers that are very concerned that it will actually put people off using them altogether. And of course, private hire vehicles can pretty much do what they wish. So, anybody would like to speak? Gary first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have quite a few points to say on this, because I have been around long enough to know we've done it's gone through this process before. But as Mr. Bryant said, we've gone through the association, but the association, I think, it's gone defunct now. So this is a private company who's pushed this forward. But before I come on to what I really wanted to say, can I just ask, through you, Chairman, Mr. Bryant, would it be fair to say that virtually all the taxi drivers, not private hire, but taxi drivers are self-employed with these companies. Can I just ask that question?
John?
Yes, councillor, that's correct. The Hackney vehicle owners or vehicle licence holders are all self-employed. They may rent their vehicles out to other drivers, but in essence, they are all self-employed.
Thank you. Come back on that.
Gambit that was. Right. I was self-employed, for those who knew what I used to do. And I'm just going on to page 13, and it's about halfway down. It says, the reason we asked for this one increase in the last 7 years, and I won't go through it, but they say on average they're about £240 per month worst off. Well, as a driving instructor, I used to pay nearly £4,000 a year for my fuel as a driving instructor. What I don't think is widely known about it, you can actually offset that £4,000 if you've got another car against tax. So it's £4,000 worth of tax you don't pay. And I say that, and again, it's all the same with the maintenance and the stuff like that. So just we'll put that on the record that, you know, just because you're self-employed, it's not horrible. You can offset an awful lot of things against paying tax. Now, going to the actual tariffs, what is current and what is proposed, I think I better put my cards on the table straight away. I don't agree with, in the recommendations A and B, for starters.
You don't agree with?
A and B.
Right.
That's the only two I do agree with potentially is consider no increase to the tariff or review the request in 6 months.
Okay.
And you quite rightly said, Chairman, at the beginning of your, you know, this debate, is that if it had been 100% across the board, I think we would be very hard push to go, well, actually, we're going to have to go with A, have to support this. But it's not quite 50%, it's near as damn it 50%. So companies, all businesses, as they come out of the pandemic and back into reality and normal life again, their income will get better. Mm-hmm. If we go down with the station taxis increase, I, for one, will become the designated driver, because there's no way that I would pay these rates at all. Yeah. And I used to use if I came out of London on social, I would always get into a taxi at Hayward Station, because they never stopped in Balcombe, and then get on a taxi, come up, and I would pay the going rate for that. But I would not pay these rates. Yeah. I would become the designated driver, and I would not do that. So I do think this is wrong in all respects. So I would personally recommend, for me, my own brain, is D, review the request in 6 months. Yeah. Go out to get the officer to write out to the trade again and see if it's changed. Mm-hmm. See if it's more saying we really want more money, or actually we're doing okay. But it'd be interesting to see what the debate for the other people is.
I think that's a very, very fair, reasonable comment.
Thank you, Chairman.
Indeed. Councillor Mrs. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've got a really difficult balancing act to perform really here tonight, because whilst that I can fully accept, we've got respondents from only half of the taxi drivers, and actually that makes it overall, that's 27.5% of taxi drivers have kind of expressed their desire to put the fares up, whilst 22.5% didn't want it. But I looked up on the Office for National Statistics. I mean, inflation is cumulative inflation over that period is 9.1%. So we have to understand that these taxi drivers live in the reality, and that, you know, everything has gone up by 9.1% over that period. And the only way, you know, if they've got to absorb these costs, then what is their option? Is it to drive more hours? And that has implications on safety, as colleagues here will know that we have to often deal with in other committees. But I'd like to know, Chairman, I wonder if Mr Bryant knows the fact whether you said that the private hire charges have been put up. Do we know what effect that has had on the business of these for those drivers?
John?
No, I'm not aware of what the impact has been for the private hire drivers within station taxis.
Thank you, John. So basically what you're saying is that it's pretty evenly balanced.
I think it's a very difficult balancing act that we've got, because they've got to be able to earn a living, and if inflation has gone up by 9.1%, then, you know, it's just very difficult, isn't it?
It is.
I mean,
I'll take your point. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mrs Crowley.
Thank you, Chairman. When I first looked at this, I was strongly not in favour. And there are a number of reasons why, particularly around that Tariff 2, which I think fundamentally changes the way people use taxes. If we think about when the type of people who may well be coming home late at night, I remember when I was working in London and commuting quite a lot, that if there was a late meeting, I could potentially be coming home past midnight. Equally, if I had a really early morning, I could be potentially going before 6 a.m. And getting to the train station. Looking at those prices, that would make that unaffordable for me to get a taxi, which would leave me with the only option of walking. Recently on social media, we've had a number of women who've already been unable to get taxis outside of the station and have resorted to walking home, and that's caused a huge amount of concern within the community on the safety of those women. So my first concern was about the type of people who'd be penalised with that additional fare. And then families going on holiday where their only option is getting a taxi. So there's a number of people who'd be hit by that. So I know that we're looking at the livelihoods of the taxi drivers, but we're also potentially looking at the livelihoods and safety of people who require a taxi to get into the station. There is also the not mid-Sussex taxis, which are already considerably cheaper. So that then led me to start thinking, well, if there's already an option that's cheaper on the market and is slightly more unreliable because there is so much demand for that, then what pressure would that put on the taxi drivers themselves if they effectively price themselves out of the market, particularly at those crucial times? Do we want women and vulnerable people waiting around for a taxi because the demand is so high on a cheaper alternative? And then I looked at the comments from the taxi drivers, and I think if this really was detrimental to the livelihoods of taxi drivers, surely more people would have taken part in the survey, and wouldn't more of them express stronger desires? The fact that there were a number of them that said, we do not want this, makes me think that it can't be affecting some and not others. So maybe the effect isn't as strong as the report may indicate. Yeah. So I think with all of that balanced, I would probably look to reviewing this in 6 months when there's a little bit more data, where we can see the effect of just inflation on those drivers, and then for them to survey again. And if not more people take part in that, then I think we probably have our answer there.
I think that's a very, very fair comment, very, very well reasoned. I think, yes, it does seem fairly balanced between yes and no, doesn't it? And that would incline me to feel the same way, that it might well be better to wait until such time as it's more clear as to where we're going with this. Councillor Laban. Sat up. Testing me, aren't you?
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Technology. Right. I've got a number of questions. I'm not overly uncomfortable with the proposition per se. I am concentrating on the detail, and I do have a few questions. and I note the comments regarding the closeness of the vote and the care that we'll be examining or putting the examination in terms of the balance of that.
Mm-hmm.
Pity that didn't happen on other things that close, but still, there we are. I'm down tariff, and I note that there are amendments, for the next so many metres. Tariff 1 is 128 metres, then it jumps up to 141, then it jumps up to 120, and then repeats at 120, then goes back to 141. So I'm actually wondering, I don't understand why it jumps around. Bearing in mind that it's complicated, I do numbers, I'm wondering actually how the public are going to cope with that. That's the first question. It could be clearer and, shall we say, more consistent. And secondly, I'm uncomfortable with the, shall we say, the mixture of timings on here. Tariff 2 says between 12 o'clock midnight and 6 a.m. I'd much rather see, from the interest of clarity, either 000 or 2400 hours to 0600 hours, as we would in an alcohol licensing application. And then further down, Tariff 3, from 1800 until 2300, I think that's reasonably clear. Tariff 4, then we've got 12 a.m. What do we mean by that? Do we mean midnight? Do we mean 00, or do we mean midday? It's not
That's
clear
a good
enough.
point.
We can do
is it
better.
12 noon, or are we talking 12 midnight? I
Yeah,
think it's
so
more likely to be
it
12 midnight.
should be
John, would you like to
absolutely
come back
beyond
on that?
doubt. I've made the assumption that private hire vehicle charges are cheaper than Hackney carriage licences. I'm actually wondering what the difference is between the two. And in terms of the taxi drivers, if we approve this increase, bearing in mind it's very clear that taxi drivers do not have to actually apply it. They can actually opt to charge a lower fare than the meter, or how do they publish, or how many, if drivers, if station taxis, well, if we gave the increase, permission for the increase, and station taxis as the main proposer implemented it, if the other drivers or the independents chose not to, how would they be able to actually communicate to the public so that it actually gives the public a better choice in terms of price?
I'm assuming they would have to advertise. Is that correct,
how
John?
do we differentiate?
You've asked a number of questions there, Councillor.
Thank you.
Can I give John a chance to answer for us?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Band, I'll go through your questions as I've noted them down. Firstly, Tariff 4, it is 12 a.m. midnight. That tariff comment would be amended in the drafting to ensure that clarity of the timings, but it's from midnight to 6 a.m. The difference in fares between taxi and private hire, whether they're cheaper or not, because the council don't regulate private hire fares, there are some private hire companies which charge more than the current tariff, and there are some which charge less than the current tariff. I, to be perfectly honest, haven't got any knowledge of the fare breakdown of the private hire companies within Mid-Sussex, because it's not an issue that we regulate or would need to regulate. And finally, your final point, that if it was brought in about the self-employed drivers, if they wish to charge less than the advertised tariff, well, the meter would have to be set to the agreed tariff. But what the driver would do when a customer got into the vehicle is explain to them that they would be charging X amount less than what the meter rate is. It could be quite complicated, but unfortunately, when the council set the tariff for the Hackney vehicles, it's set for all Hackney vehicles. They have, in law, they have the ability to charge less if they wish, but they can't charge more. But how they communicate that to members of the public to say, come and get in my vehicle because I charge 20% less, would be probably problematic for the drivers.
Thank you very much indeed, John. As I see it, what is being said at the moment, and I will come back because other people want to speak, there is a sort of a balance between the people who want to see an increase, the taxi drivers, and those who don't. And there also seems to be, saying that they don't want the complication of the extra tariffs. So, as I see it at the moment, and I might have this all completely wrong, it's whether there seems to be a strong opinion that we should give it 6 months to settle down. But if not, the alternative would be to increase the simple tariff. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cromley, I'm going to nick apart for what she said. It's on page 10 and it's paragraph 9. And to further break it down, we've got 134 vehicle licence holders were contacted, of which 67, which is 50% basically, responded and 50% didn't. So out of that 50% responded, that even further breaks it down. So I'm working on the assumption that the 50% who didn't respond are what I would call the silent majority, i.e. they were quite happy with the status quo. Mm. So they didn't feel strongly one way or another, so they didn't bother replying. Would that be a fair assumption? Yes, yeah, good. So out of the 50% that did respond, 55 went for it and 45 didn't. So I would like to think lumping the 45 to the others.
It's split.
It's a massive, we're happy with the way it is and we don't feel there's any need to do it. So I would propose, through you, Chairman, that I would recommend that we do D, review the request in 6 months.
Okay, that's the proposal.
That's my proposal.
I'm going to let Councillor Webb and Councillor Ban come back, if I may. But I would ask, is there anybody that is prepared to second that motion? We've got Councillor Cromley prepared to second that. So I believe that what is right now to do is to let Councillor Webb and Councillor Band have their say, and then we will go to the vote. Thank you very much. Councillor Webb, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, in view of the projected increases in energy costs that are with us at the moment, which will no doubt be reflected in fuel costs before too long, can we expect another application if we were to approve this one in the near future?
That's a point of conjecture. John, what do you feel?
How can I put this? Chair, there's been one rise in the last 7 years. This one has come 3 years after the previous one. The trade could, if they wished, ask yearly for an annual rise,
yeah.
But it wouldn't be any earlier than a 12-monthly cycle.
Okay. Don't mind me calling you John, teacher, that's fine. I'm going to let you come back, Councillor Ban, and then Councillor Knight would like to have a say.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Two things. One, going back to the question in terms of the transparency, is there if we do actually postpone this decision and push it back, 6 months is a long time. Could we look at 3 or 4, if that's permissible? And secondly, during that time, can we use it to actually see if there's a role either through the business associations across Mid Sussex, I don't know how we do that, or at Mid Sussex Council, to see if we can actually facilitate, shall we say, a transparency so that our public can actually see which taxi firm is charging which if this proposal goes ahead. It would certainly provide a better service for our public if we could do that. Only, obviously, money and resources are tight.
Okay.
We can't.
I think at this stage, I think we've got some pretty good proposals on the table without shortening or lengthening the actual period for review, in my opinion. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chairman. Not wishing to check Councillor Anthony Lee's arithmetic in terms of inflation. I'm just looking now, I actually work it out about 19% accumulative over the last 7 years. I don't know what increase was given in...
I think it's 2018.
I'm looking over the last 7 years, it's actually about 19%. And I don't know what increase we gave in 2018, because that might have a factor in terms of, you know, that's quite a substantial inflationary increase, and that's the cumulative increase over 7 years. So my apologies, I didn't realise it was 3 years.
Bless you.
Councillor Lee.
It's 2018.
Yeah, I'm looking 7 years, because we've been talking about 7 years and one increase in 7 years. So it's 19% inflation increase, and I don't know what they were given in 2018. So that would be my question, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
In 2018, I think you'll find most of the fuel, because I was active at that point in time, most of the fuel we were paying was around 140, 142, 143, something like that, about 10p a litre changed. It plummeted as the pandemic hit, and it bumped along around about £1 a litre. So reality is, though it is cumulative when you look at it, it started off high, it plummeted during the pandemic, and it has climbed, obviously, as the fuel companies have done what they've done. And they should, in theory, hand back about 20p a litre, but they're not, because they're trying to capture all the time they didn't. But so reality is, it's not hugely different from what it was in 2018.
I think that's very, very useful insight, Councillor Morris. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we have two more people who'd like to speak. Councillor Knight.
If I may come back, I'm talking about inflation here. I'm not talking about petrol prices. I'm talking overall inflation.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Councillor Mrs. Lee.
Well, actually, I was going to make the same point as Councillor Knight here, that I was talking about, you know, overall inflation and what these, you know, taxi drivers have got to cover with their earnings.
No, that's absolutely fine. And I think if you look at the comments, actually, there seems to be some distance between the people that tend to work for, if I may say this, the people that work for station taxis and the actual drivers that are having to drive for their own business, and they seem to be opposed to the increase from what I was reading. We have a proposal on the table. It has been seconded. The proposal is that we in 6 months. So I'm going to ask for a vote on that one online, please, if we can all remember how to do it. The proposal is to review it in 6 months. And we have 11 in favour, 1 opposed, and so that motion is carried. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Moving swiftly on to item number 6, we have a report informing licensing committee of an introduction of a mandatory tax conditionality checks. And I'm going to ask our dear friend John to take us through that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the information of the licensing committee. And renewals that will be introduced from, in fact, the 4th of April 2022. Some members may be aware that the Finance Act of 2021 introduced additional checks as part of applications to renew licences for taxi and private hire drivers, private hire vehicle operators and scrap metal dealers in England and Wales. From the 4th of April, these licence applicants must complete a tax check, and licensing bodies must confirm that the applicant has completed the check. If they don't complete the check, then we won't be able to process a renewal. The report details the fact that these changes have been brought along by HMRC due to the hidden economy, where it's estimated that £2.6 billion should have been paid in tax between 2018 to 2019. And that many people operating in what's called the hidden economy do so because they are either unaware or confused about their tax obligations. And obviously, if they've been hiding their income for a longer period, they will find it harder to come forward to inform HMRC. The conditionality aims to address that part of the hidden economy, one, by helping applicants for certain public sector licences, better understand their tax obligations, and making access to the licences they need to trade conditional on a tax check. As I've said, that the measure will come in from new and applications to renew a licence made from the 4th of April, and these will be Hackney driver licences, private hire driver licences, licences issued to private hire operators, and also licences issued under Section 2 of the Scrap Metal Dealers Act. Those are site licences and also collectors' licences. The conditionality checks will apply to applications made by individuals, companies and partnerships. And licensing bodies will be required to signpost first-time applicants to HMRC guidance about their potential tax obligations. Where the application is not a first-time application, such as a renewal application, the licensing body must, before considering the application, obtain confirmation from HMRC that an applicant has completed a tax check. In essence, if the applicant doesn't provide evidence that they've completed the tax check, we won't start to process their renewal. So it's not a case where they can come back to the committee to ask for their licence to be renewed. It's a hurdle that they have to cross before we even consider processing their renewal. The applicant will carry out a tax check. They will provide information to enable HMRC to satisfy themselves that they've complied with an obligation to notify their chargeability to tax. And the check includes a question about whether the income from the licensed activity has been declared to HMRC. Once the HMRC is satisfied they've received the information, they will provide the applicant with a check code. Licence holder will complete the tax check through the Gov.uk government website or through their government gateway account. They only have a few questions to tell HMRC how they pay their tax, to notify HMRC and HMRC to be satisfied that they're properly registered for it. The licensing authority will have a separate portal for which we will complete our tax check. As I understand it, the portal isn't yet live, but HMRC will just confirm to us the name of the applicant and the fact that they have completed a valid tax check. The licensing authority will not have access to any of the tax details of the applicant. It would just be confirmation that they've completed the check satisfactorily. There are occasions if we're unable to obtain confirmation of the tax check due to a failure by HMRC, or the applicant has been unable to obtain a check code due to a failure by HMRC, then there'll be a dispensation from the applicant as to having to provide that code. The HMRC have provided draft information relating to the new requirement of the forthcoming check, and that has been circulated to all licensed drivers and holders of scrap metal dealers' licences and private hire operators. And these regulations impose a mandatory requirement on the council to conduct these checks prior to processing and issuing any of those specified licence types. Obviously, I'm available to answer as far as I can any questions with regard to these checks for the committee.
Thank you very much indeed, John. That's very helpful. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a question more for Yvonne or John on this one. This is a policy change. Does this affect our policy, taxi policy? I welcome it. I totally welcome it, you know, to get rid of the, I mean, I had to pay enough flaming tax. I think everybody else should as well. But is this a policy change? Will this, I know it's information only, will this written into our policy for taxis and other licences we deal with?
No, Councillor, the government have made it quite clear that it's not won't form part of the policy for licensing taxis, private hire drivers and operators. It will become a legal requirement which we have to do before we commence the renewal fit and proper process.
Excellent, thank you. Do you want to come back on that? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. John, you said that if there was a failure of the system or the HMRC were unable to provide a code for the applicant due to that system failure or whatever, how will the applicant prove that that was the situation, that they came to you and said, well, I couldn't get a code because HMRC were down or for some other reason?
HMRC assured us on the webinar, which they conducted for all licensing authorities, that if that was to occur, they would ensure that the licensing authority was aware that at that particular time, the applicant wasn't able to access the system. So, for example, if their website went down for 2 days and the applicant attempted to log in during those 2 days, they would be able to confirm to us that the applicant was unable to access it during that time. They don't expect applicants to have to keep revisiting the website every half hour to try and get their code. So they'd be able to confirm that their site was unavailable for these checks.
That's good to hear. Thank you, John. I see no one else wanted to ask any questions or make any points. We are asked to vote to accept the recommendation, and we need to note the report. So can I see you put your vote on there? Thank you. The report is noted. We have 11 voting for. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. That is noted. And moving swiftly on. Sorry, I can't hear you, Councillor Van.
Sorry, Chair. A point of order, if I may. Item 3 on Agenda 6. It says the recommendation is, the report is for information purposes only. We shouldn't vote on it. You should have said noted.
I take your point, but it does give me the instruction here. Members to vote with the voting buttons on the unit, please announce the results. So I'm following the instructions that I was given, Councillor Band.
Point of order then, because the public are relying upon our
I'll leave
agenda.
you to find that out afterwards. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving swiftly on, the report to Licensing Committee, as you can see, is to do with, there's some fact sheets, by the way, on there about what is changed and what isn't. And this is the last item on the agenda is that the committee identify the type of door sign to be adopted and whether the signs are solely adhesive or if the vehicle proprietors can mount them magnetically. Now, we have a number on the back. This will cover both licensed hackney carriages and also advanced booking cars, private hire cars. So we're asked to decide whether we're going to allow, as I understand it, whether we're going to allow them to continue to use magnetic signs and whether we're looking to introduce the elliptical ones or the rectangular ones. And I'm going to ask John to outline it to us, please. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. The final report before the committee is to provide the committee with details of the draft door signs for the decision to be made on the preferred format in preparation of their introduction on the 1st of October 2022. The committee will be aware that the taxi and private hire policy introduced a requirement for licensed vehicles to display the Mid-Sussex logo, identifying the vehicles as being licensed in Mid-Sussex, and draft signs have been prepared for the committee's consideration. Now, the recommendations on the report are that the committee identify the type of door sign to be adopted and whether the signs are solely adhesive or if vehicle proprietors can mount them magnetically. The policy mandates, as I said, from the 1st of October this year, all licensed hackney carriage vehicles, they will be white in colour and will be marked with the Mid-Sussex logo and licence number on the rear passenger doors. And likewise, private hire vehicles will also be required to display the signs of the Mid-Sussex logo, their licence number, and the wording private hire vehicle advanced booking only. The more eagle-eyed members will notice that on one of the private hire signs it doesn't say that phrase, but that is the phrase which will be on the signs when it is adopted. Now, the purpose of those licence conditions are to protect the public. It will clearly identify mid-Sussex licensed vehicles to help provide reassurance to the travelling public that the vehicle and driver are locally licensed. And the measure will also assist the public in distinguishing between the two types of licensed vehicles. In preparation of the introduction of the vehicle condition, the licensing team have obtained a selection of door signs, and the committee are invited to assess the samples and advise the licensing team which signage they wish to adopt. Now, it is anticipated that the signs that are supplied will be adhesive, and they're designed to be permanently fixed to the vehicles rather than have magnetic backing, so they're only temporarily fixed. Currently, the authority permits door signs displayed on private hire vehicles to be either permanently fixed or temporarily fixed with a magnetic backing. Now, there are issues surrounding magnetic signs. The ease of removal of magnetic signs leaves them vulnerable to theft and loss, and potentially their use on unlicensed vehicles. There have been several occasions where currently permitted magnetic door signs on private hire vehicles have become detached due to incorrect fitting, the driver putting them on the vehicle when it is dirty, or they're not being stored properly when not in use. You may be aware that magnetic signs have to be stored laid flat. If there's any kinks in them, then the magnetic backing takes that, and obviously they don't fix securely. On roads where there's the national speed limit, they can become detached due to the speed of vehicle. And obviously this poses a clear public safety risk if magnetic door signs were placed on unlicensed vehicles. On the other hand, for some vehicle proprietors, their licensed vehicle is the only family vehicle. And when the vehicle is not being used for licensed purposes, it's utilised for family use by themselves. They therefore prefer that the vehicle is not identified as a licensed vehicle when it's being used for this purpose, and they take advantage of the ability to remove signage when not working. Magnetic signs are claimed to damage the vehicle paintwork less than the adhesive ones, which can leave a discoloured mark on removal if they're attached for a long time. However, as stated, the ease of removal of magnetic signs leaves them vulnerable to theft and loss, and use on, as stated, unlicensed vehicles. As a licensed vehicle is always a licensed vehicle, no matter what its use at the relevant time, there appears to be a compelling argument in favour of permanently attaching adhesive signs. However, that's something for the committee to consider. As licensed vehicles, both Hackney and private hire are working vehicles. The costs associated with their use, including depreciation, must be considered, and when balanced against the problems and risks associated with magnetic signs, the committee may consider that this would be sufficient reason to require the use of adhesive signs only. If magnetic signage is permitted, then it would be for vehicle proprietors their responsibility to provide the necessary magnetic backing sheet for both signs at their expense, and they would be required to notify the licensing team immediately of any loss of any signage and arrange for the provision of replacement signs prior to returning to work. As I stated, there's two sample signs for each vehicle under consideration. In the policy context, I've detailed for the benefit of the committee the legal context and the policy context, and the financial implications are that obviously we keep our fees and charges under review annually, and we look to recover as much of the costs as regulating the taxi and private hire licensing service that we are legally able to through fees and charges. So there wouldn't be any excess costs on the council with the introduction of any of the signs. And finally, the policy that was introduced by the committee is obviously intended to protect the public, including those who are vulnerable due to their age or disability.
Thank you very much indeed, John. That's very comprehensive. Question from me, if I may. It appears that what we're going to be voting on is two things: whether they can use magnetic or not, and the actual shape of the signs. Is there anything to stop us from, say, introducing the elliptical ones for private hire vehicles and the rectangular ones for Hackney carriages, so that the Hackney carriages can immediately be identified in opposition to private hire vehicles?
Chair, that's correct. As you say, to consider the two points of whether it should be magnetic and adhesive or adhesive only, and the designs are there for the committee to consider. There's no reason why there couldn't be different shapes for different vehicles.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's very helpful. Councillor Marsh.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Go for it. We're going to have to get used to this, aren't we?
We are. Yeah, mine was on all the time, you see, when I was sitting over there. Yeah, I welcome this. Personally, I think the question you just raised is a very good question. On my car, I have magnetic. I do know there was a number of driver instructors who had adhesive ones, and then when they came to swap it in, they when they finally peeled off the L plate, it was a different colour from the rest of the car. It was darker because obviously the sun had got to the rest of it. So I personally would prefer the, but it's obviously what we're going to magnet. But that's the thing. I like the idea of swapping. I personally would have gone with what you said. I like the square one, the oblong one for the taxis, and the elliptical one for the private hire. Yeah. I think it looks, I could easily go with that one as well. It's just that there is a way, a technique of putting these things on. And as John just mentioned, they are meant to be stored flat to maintain their integrity. But if they go on warm, they will not fly off. Yeah. Trust me, I've done 69.9 miles an hour, and then mine have stayed on with my pupils on it as well. So I personally like the oblong for our taxi drivers,
the Hackney garages,
and the round ones. And I personally, is there an option that they could either or do we say they have to have that? Because I personally would go for magnetic myself.
Thank you.
As long as the surface is clean and it's relatively warm, they will stay on. And bearing in mind, on the front of a car, there's invariably a curvature on the side door, the rear side door. It tends to be just straight, so you shan't get a kink to go over it.
No, I think that's. I'm going to come to John in a second, but my only concern, coming back to what Councillor Cromie was saying earlier on, when you can't find a taxi and you're going for a hire car vehicle, if somebody nicked a hire car vehicle stick-on one, stuck it on their car, would I like to see a friend of mine or whatever, my wife or whatever, out late at night, and that's a particular situation. I think we have to bear that in mind.
There is. Can I come back?
Yeah, of course you can.
From an ex-policeman's point of view, a taxi driver, a taxi has the taxi sign on top as well.
Oh no.
So from the taxi side, private hire,
yeah,
you would expect you have to phone through to a base station.
Yeah.
And the base station send it to a taxi driver.
This is true. That's what.
And if you pick up somebody who's got the yellow one off the road, which we frequently do in subcommittee A, then they're being naughty, and they've actually just picked off the street, and the taxi driver who thinks he's a taxi driver, but he's actually a private hire, is actually breaking the law, and his insurance is null and void.
No, that's absolutely right. They should not be picking up fares. They should only go to. But
then a quick check to make sure, and perhaps we ought to promote this on social media, walk to the back of the car to find out if there's a plate attached to it as well.
Okay, thanks. John, the particular question that was asked there by Councillor Marsh, did you remember what it was? I'm sorry, it's my fault.
Can they have the choice? Because I think the committee should determine the shape.
Yeah.
But can they have a choice of adhesive or magnetic? Obviously, magnetic costs more, and they should have to pay for it. Yeah. Not to any charge to the council.
John.
Yes, Chair. The proposal is for the committee to either decide whether it would be solely adhesive or a mixture of adhesive and magnetic for the driver's choice. it would be anticipated that if the driver wished it to be magnetic, then they would provide the licence department with a magnetic backing to attach the sign to prior to the sign being issued to them. It would be problematical for the licensing department to have to source the magnetic backing. I think in that case, as it is at the moment, it should be the onus on the driver to provide the backing, and then we would fix the sign onto the backing.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Councillor Crone, I think you've been very patient, bless you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you made the point I was going to make. That there are two things about the magnetic sign that concerns me. The first is it has our name on it. So if it were to get stolen or vandalised or it flew off on the middle of the motorway, it's fairly traceable back to Mid-Sussex District Council by default that our name's plastered all over it. So that concerns me first off, because if there were anything that happened because of a result of it coming off because of the decision we made in this committee to have it magnetic, that would come back to us.
Yeah.
Secondly, it goes back to the point that it could be stolen for malicious intent, and that really does concern me.
Yes.
Because, you know, we've had cases recently where women have been murdered because somebody pretended to be a police officer. If a woman was in distress and a taxi pulled up next to her with a identifiable sign on its side of the car, that might be enough for somebody to trust that particular car when that might be exactly the purpose of getting her into the car. Equally, if somebody just joined a taxi queue, would it be very obvious straight away that that wasn't a licensed taxi? So there's all sorts of issues. And I've had a case when I've got into a taxi and the taxi driver refused to show me his licence, and I had to have this out with the department here, and it turned out that all wasn't well with that particular taxi driver.
Yeah.
So it's not something that we talk about when we look at safety of females in a kind of hysterical way. I think it is a very big onus of us to think about that and think about if we make a decision where there's even the slightest risk to safety, whether that be because it comes off or because it could be stolen, surely that trumps the inconvenience of paint being destroyed, or the inconvenience of them having to have it stuck on, or the inconvenience of having to drive round to Sainsbury's with your family at the weekend with that sign on. That's like, these are inconveniences. The alternative could be worse.
I think that's a very good point, and I know that that's something very dear to John's heart too, about personal safety. Now, I think Councillor Laban.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that last point was made, because it saves me making it. Thank you very much. Bearing in mind that the taxis are going to be white, as from the end of this year, private hire vehicles, noddles would be sufficient. Can they be any colour? Thank you very much. Bearing in mind that we're trying to actually make these signs as clear and visible beacons of effectively safety for our members of the public, I'd find it difficult actually in supporting a white badge on a white car. I'd like to see them stand out yellow. And I like the idea that the Chair has introduced of having taxis and private hire vehicles, different shapes to actually differentiate the two. And lastly, the drivers always have the opportunity, I believe, if they can actually, at the moment, take these things off. There's no reason why they can't have a plain sticker to cover it up if they want anonymity. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we, John, a question. Are we actually voting tonight on the actual colours of the signs as well? For instance, it's been raised that a white sign, a white elliptical sign on a white private hire vehicle wouldn't be quite so intrusive, whereas a yellow one, a yellow one might look a little bit... Are we actually looking at a specific colour only for, or are they allowed to choose?
Yes, Chair. We're actually looking at a specific colour, and the reason it's white and yellow is because they match the colours of our current plates. Currently, the plate for a licensed Hackney carriage is white, and for a licensed private hire vehicle, it's yellow. There is the possibility that if you mix and match the colours on different signs and plates, that could cause some additional confusion.
Right. So they would all be the same colour?
They'd all be the same, so all Hackney carriage signs would all be the same colour, obviously, dependent on the shape that the committee decided, and the private hire vehicles would all be the same colour. And the colours match the current plates. There are other districts and councils which do currently have the same sort of signage on their vehicles, and the ones which do have white signage on white vehicles, it doesn't blend into vehicle background. It's prominent enough.
Yeah, no, that's perfect sense. Councillor Mrs. Lee, I noticed you've got your thing. Have you withdrawn?
Well, I've withdrawn it because Councillor Crowley very eloquently made the
Oh,
point.
bless you. No, that's great.
Thank you.
I think we're almost there. So I think my feeling is that we... Sorry, Councillor Marsh.
Can I back up John there?
Yeah.
Crawley have got them on the side of their taxis, and they're white, but because they've got quite a prominent logo, you'd have no difficulty seeing a Crawley one on a white, and it's white with their logo on it.
Okay.
And bearing in mind also, this is only examples of their number. This would be their plate number, I take it, on the plate number they've got on their side. So we would, and I've been persuaded to go for the adhesive, I must admit. I thought that was a very eloquent argument. I'm totally convinced that's the way we should go.
What, of adhesive ones? So, I'm going to, what I need is a proposal. What I'm going to suggest is, I don't know whether this is okay, please tell me if it is. I'm going to propose, first of all, that we decide on the shape for the private hire vehicle, and that we vote on that one. So can I have a proposal on the shape for the private hire vehicle? Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Elliptical. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you very much indeed. So let's take a vote on that one first, if we may. So it's the elliptical sign for the private hire vehicles. Let's vote on that now. All in favour, nobody against, and therefore that's carried. So elliptical signs for the private hire vehicles, and it follows that we have the square ones for the Hackney vehicle licence. Would somebody like to propose that? Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Ban, and seconded by Councillor Cromie. So can we have a vote on that one? I think you're all way... Oh no, here we go. So we've got the rectangular ones for the licences, and I'm going to combine the two for the vote, whether they are allowed to be permanent or magnetic. Can I have a proposal from somebody? Councillor Marsh. Councillor Cromie seconded that. So can we go to the vote on that? So they are adhesive ones. Actually, 11 in favour. I can't see any against. So that is carried. So just to see where we are at the moment, they are the elliptical ones for the private hire vehicles, the rectangular ones for the Hackney carriage licences, and John, just regarding the colour, is that something we need to vote on, or is the colour not a problem they can decide?
Yeah, Chair, that's correct. The colours doesn't need to be decided by the committee, as they match the current plate colours for the vehicles concerned.
Okay. So regarding the private hire, sorry, Councillor Ban, you wanted to ask something.
Thank you, Chair. Does that mean that we would have potentially white private hire vehicles and yellow taxis, so that you actually have different colour badges, different classes.
Councillor, all the Hackney carriages, taxis will be white as from the 1st of October. We won't allow any other colours. With regard to the private hire vehicles, they can be any colour other than white.
Okay. So does that mean, no, what we're saying is the actual signages, are they a specific colour dependent on whether they're Hackney or private hire?
Sorry, my misunderstanding, yes. The yellow is specific to private hire, the white is specific to Hackney vehicles.
Thank you. So that's decided already. Thank you very much. And finally, the last item on the agenda is questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2. I have none, and therefore I declare this meeting closed at... Oh, sorry, yes. 6:05. Thank you very much. And bless you for your kindness to me.